The human storm of protest in Egypt as 250,000 protesters erupted after their 82-year-old president Hosni Mubarak emerged saying he will not run for re-election in September. But is that soon enough for them, or will his latest move just stoke another round of protests? And another key question tonight: does Mubarak's announcement open the door for radical Islamic enemies of the U.S.? And who is the mysterious fundamentalist group in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood? Our team is standing by to answer questions, and we'll turn first to Christiane Amanpour, who's covered this region for more than 20 years and was in the middle of those protests today. Christiane, good evening once again.
Good evening, Diane. And it was an extraordinary sight to see President Mubarak, having been a leader of Egypt for the last 30 years and a linchpin leader in this region, offering these major concessions. But now his people and now the United States, his main ally, have abandoned him. Tonight, Liberation Square erupted in anger as the people finally heard from the man they've risen up against. Appearing on state television, President Mubarak addressed the protesters directly, telling them their demands are legitimate and that he will stand down. But not just yet. Instead, he pledged to spend his next few months in office restoring law and order, reforming the constitution and the election law. Not good enough, said this defiant crowd in Cairo. This moment was a week in the making, a week of steadily mounting pressure from people in the streets and leaders around the world. President Obama dispatched Frank Wisner, a former ambassador to Egypt, to deliver a message directly to Mubarak, suggesting he not seek re-election. And across Egypt, the rallies reached a tipping point today. These people called it the March of Millions, a sweeping sea of people flooding into Cairo's city center. And as they started pouring in this morning, they were in no mood to compromise. In the shadow of the statue of one of their greatest liberation leaders, people have been coming and going all day to the protest in the central square there. On this main bridge across the Nile, you can see tens of thousands of people just walking. Bridges became parking lots as people abandoned their cars to start walking. At times, we were almost swallowed up by the thickening crowd. Some came prepared for the worst.
I got a plastic sheet for the water cannon. I got towels for my nose. I got my will written yesterday. What else you want?
Your will written?
I wrote my will yesterday. If I die, I die. So what?
But like the past several days, this one ended without violence. And Mubarak himself concluded his speech by asking the army again to continue to protect the people and to respect their freedom and their honor. Now, it remains to be seen whether tonight's concessions are enough. The people tonight seem in no mood to have him stay on. We'll see whether people power continues. Diane?
Thank you, Christiane. Planning to spend the night out in that square tonight they are. And as you said, Christiane, a roar greeted President Mubarak's announcement that he will not seek re-election. The crowd even bigger today, in fact, the biggest in Egyptian history. So who are these people who came from all over to stand shoulder to shoulder? Lama Hassan talked to them.
As we walked through the square today, the red, white and black flags of Egypt fluttered. A spirit of pride everywhere we looked. We met this family who brought their 3 children to the rally. 10-year-old Dunya told us she loved her country, but doesn't want President Mubarak to rule anymore. I don't have a job, her father told us. The economy is so bad, I can't keep my home. For the first time in their lives, Egyptians have found their voice.
Now we are regaining our dignity and we are regaining our spirit.
And that voice is growing louder and louder.
They're saying, this is just one of the chants we've been hearing around the square today, and it means he leaves, we're not leaving.
This family has joined the protests every day. I am here for the future of my kids, she told us. They need to live in a democratic country. They need freedom. Amid this sea of humanity, we found Barbara Ibrahim.
My husband was imprisoned by Hosni Mubarak and his regime 3 times. And I'm just so happy that I've seen this day that young Egyptians take back their country.
And as the day ended, as the sun set over the banks of the Nile, people were still coming to the square in search of freedom. Lama Hassan, ABC News, Cairo.
And now that question so many Americans are asking, do the events in Egypt increase the danger of terrorism here at home? With our longtime ally, President Mubarak, vowing not to run, who will come next? Here's Martha Raddatz, who covers foreign affairs, security, and has traveled extensively across Egypt.
These protests have had one purpose, getting rid of Mubarak. But now what? The biggest fear for the U.S., that Egypt will turn towards Islamic fundamentalism. The Muslim Brotherhood, protesters representing the oldest and largest Islamic organization in Egypt, have advocated a state ruled by Islamic law, which would mean a step backwards for women's rights and the rule of law. They do not openly back al-Qaeda, but several of the founders of al-Qaeda were former members.
If somehow the Muslim Brotherhood were put in charge of the government in Egypt, it might make it possible for other terrorist groups to use Egypt again as a sanctuary, and it might mean an end to the peace between Israel and Egypt.
Another, perhaps more likely option, an outsider. Mohammed al-Baradei is a Nobel laureate who has returned to Egypt after years abroad. He ran the UN's nuclear watchdog program and opposed the Iraq War. The U.S. concerns about an outsider? He is not fully in line with U.S. policy toward Israel. A third option, Omar Suleiman. This is Mubarak's clear favorite. He's just named vice president. He would be a favorite of the military, coming from that world himself. But to the protesters, he would mean more of the same.
It doesn't necessarily work well for the United States if there's an Egyptian president who works very well with us, but is not popular within his own country.
There is also the unknown candidate, someone who will emerge as rapidly as the people in this square emerged to change history. Martha Raddatz, ABC News, Washington.